Hi and welcome, Chris Parkin here from SIT and a member of Rotary Camera Club, and I'm just going to cover a few bits and pieces about smart objects, having just been to the PSNZ conference and had Julianne Cost extol the virtues of this in your non-destructive workflow. So you're more than welcome to go and have a look for Julianne, and I'll pop a link up in below to some of her work. But I'm just going to do something directly to show you a couple of bits and pieces. So you'll hopefully be used to using either Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom in your non-destructive editing workflow, and this use of smart objects is basically another step within that. So there's multiple ways of getting to a smart object, but if you work in Lightroom or go directly from Photoshop, it's worth making sure you generate that smart object directly, and that way it's looking at the raw file rather than another processed version of the file, and therefore if you go through that extra step and open it as a dumb object to start with, you end up losing resolution. So let's have a look at how to do it, and then we'll have a look at the advantages. So in Photoshop, edit a smart object in Photoshop, and that's it. It will boot up Photoshop for you and open it, and you'll notice the file comes up here with this little symbol, so you can actually see that it is a smart object. If you double click on the object, it will then open up in Camera Raw, so you can do all of your color balance changes, etc. in this, and then when you're done, click OK, and they will be applied to your background. Now we'll delete that for a second, and we will open this as a smart object, and this is how you would get into your file and then just grab your, in my case it's an ARW file, and whatever your raw file happens to be, and open. And if you're opening directly from Photoshop, it will bring up a Camera Raw as soon as you do that, so you can make all your changes that you want to. In this case, I'll tweak the exposure a little bit as well, just make sure our highlights aren't blown out. And the other thing that we desperately need to do is to crop this and make sure that we've actually got the object square in the frame, otherwise everything's going to look on a lean. Okay, so we click OK, and again it will open up that as a raw file. Now here's where it gets interesting. Normally when you would resize this file, Control T and shrink it down and click Apply. Now let's bring it back up again, and let's see whether or not we've got a decent resolution to work with. And click OK, and you can see the resolution's pretty much behaved itself. We haven't lost any detail. Now if we can, we'll duplicate this, and I'm going to convert that to rasterize it, which makes it back to pixels. Control T, and this time we're going to shrink it down again. Let's make it about 11% of what it is, and then we're going to expand it. So Control T, expand, and you can already see that there's something going on. And even when we click the tick and apply that change, you can see that we've lost some of the resolution. Now if I turn that off and compare it to the original file, there we go, you're definitely losing detail in there. And the more that you shrink your file down and the more that you change the size, every time you tick the box, it will recalculate the image, and then when you try and blow it back up again, Photoshop will go and try and fill in those blanks. And of course the problem is, every time you do it, the image gets a much lower resolution. So if I hide that layer, you can see the original, see the changed version, and it just degrades the whole of your image. Now it doesn't take much, and it makes your image totally unusable. If you use a smart object in layer masks, then it doesn't matter how many times you resize it, as long as it stays a smart object, it's going to. So smart objects do have their disadvantages, and the main one is that you can't directly draw on the smart object. So if we've got our brush selected and we try and draw on it, it's going to tell you that you have to rasterize the layer before you can do that. But that's not the end of the world. What you can do is continue to work non-destructively and create a new layer, and you can then paint on that mask, on that layer over the top. Now, of course, same thing goes for cloning. If you want to clean up a mess that you've made, or you've got a dust spot that you need to get rid of, then you can continue to work on that layer there and fix things up from that point of view, rather than working directly on the layer. Now, there is one thing that you need to be aware of. If you then go and change that smart object, and say you realize that you've not got the color temperature right, and you've done cloning, when it prepares the smart object, and we should be able to see the difference, we can see that this hasn't been changed here. So any of that cloning that you've done, or painting onto the layer, a new layer, won't actually change the one below. So just be aware that the better option, particularly for doing cloning work, is to open your file and do the cloning in here. It'll still be non-destructive, but it'll means that any changes that are applied later in the document won't cause that problem. And that's about it. Have a great week.